What are we talking about again?
I feel like almost every episode starts with me sitting down going, oh.
which yes.
I just hope no one out there does a supercut of
yes.
of
Sean's noises.
Yeah, my gosh, that'd be embarrassing. But you know, hey, look at that. Confidence monitor is working.
Great.
So we can in fact confirm we are recording. So that's good.
Recording
that's
in
good.
the fancy schmancy studio space.
That's right.
Yes.
We're back here in the Future of Being Human Initiative Thought Laboratory.
Thought Lab, yes.
Which I really like. I really like
I
that.
didn't know the real name.
Yeah. That's,
it wasn't a real name until we recorded in there.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
And then
weeks
we
ago, yes.
sort of just decided that's now the name.
The thing, yes.
That's right.
I like it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
But yeah, no, this is fantastic. So instead of doing like an awkward cold open like we normally do, I think that's our aim when we have guests is we kind of get into it a little quicker maybe. But yeah,
We're going to cut straight to the chase. Shortest cold open ever.
let's do it.
Okay.
Interesting.
Initializing waveform.
Modulating signals for transmission.
Exploring the possible, probable, and preferable futures.
Welcome to Modem Futura. Well, welcome to Modem Futura, the podcast that explores the intersection of technology, society, and the possible, probable, and preferable futures, asking deep questions like what does it mean to be human in the future? I'm Sean Leahy, joined with my co-host,
Andrew Maynard.
and that means this is Modem Futura. And today we are joined by another special guest, Sean Dudley. So, Sean, thank you for joining us.
Sean's.
We've got,
yes.
you know, we might break the internet with two Seans spelled the correct way.
The Irish
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
On one podcast. I don't know if has it ever happened before? Two Seans on one podcast? I don't know.
Welcome to the future.
Welcome to the future. This is a Sean squared episode. I don't know. 2 times the Sean. We'll stop there. I don't know. But Sean Dudley, thank you. And Sean is Associate Vice President of ASU Knowledge Enterprise, which you're going to have to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
You lead the Research Technology Office, correct? Which provides specialized technology solutions and services that enable and protect ASU's research community and sponsored projects. But yeah, first of all, welcome to Modem Futura, Sean. And love to hear a little bit from your perspective. Like, what is it you do here?
Yeah. It's always an
At this
interesting
little university. Yes.
right question at ASU in particular.
You're right.
I've been with the university 20 years as of just a few days ago, I found out.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations.
Does that mean you get a little badge?
Probably get something that has a pin on the back that I can wear
To
in
make you
proper
feel
attire.
really
I
bad.
feel like
yes.
I feel like
something
people
regal.
were supposed to get something like these milestones, and I'm like, I didn't get anything. Like I've like gone past these milestones.
Just
I'm like,
lost in the mail.
it's still sitting on someone's desk.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so the knowledge enterprise in particular can be a bit it's not traditional, right? Like so much of what we do at ASU and how we're structured. It's research plus entrepreneurship and innovation, all the sort of licensing tech, those kinds of things. It's a very, very wide span.
Yeah.
So I would say when we're in the business of looking to bring in another leader, especially vice president for research, that we're kind of unicorn hunting because most of them would turn up and say, I'm ready to lead research, understanding, certain things that might include. And then they look around and all of a sudden they're supposed to be an expert in 15 other things.
Right.
What's been fun though, I started on the science side in evolutionary functional genomics, a center over at the Biodesign Institute. And then just recognize we could do more to meet our scientists where they are in terms of their technology needs. And that's infrastructure, services, just really focusing in on what that opportunity space offers.
But I think that connection is really interesting and important because you're not just a service provider. You
Right.
are a working scientist and sort of researcher.
Right. So, I've been able to return to that more after focusing in on building up kind of supercomputing and other capacity at the university, stabilizing that, bringing amazing people on board. I've had the chance to grow a 100-person organization full of science technologists. People that are just an absolute pleasure to work with. My job is usually making sure they don't work too hard because they really do just connect with the science. And many of them have become active investigators or entered as active investigators. One of my favorite town hall questions is who wants to get involved in science? We will convert you lovingly. So
You will be assimilated, whether you're,
right. Yeah, there's a Borg aspect. And then, right now I've got a couple of grants as well. So I'm working with the state health department on a pathogen genomics platform for the 3 universities, for the state health agencies, and for TGen, which is a sequencing center. And then a different project, I think we're in year 3, going into year 3 with Valleywise. So our safety net clinic, really data enabling their infrastructure. The cue there occurred during the pandemic when talking to Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they'd made a kind of water cooler remark that the refugees that are engaging in services at the Valleywise clinic are at a greater health status than traditional Arizona, and that blew me away because we have people from 60 countries represented. Typically, that is not the story, right?
Sure,
Typically, there's going to be a problem of health status, and so we moved to. I talked to the person that founded the clinic. It was the first originally women's health clinic in the country for refugees, and then we just sort of developed a proposal to explore their success and try to carry that across, non-prescriptively, but just sort of. What are the principles that might help others?
Yeah.
So you have your fingers in a lot of pies, but none of that seems to relate to the stuff that is your big passion at the moment.
And why we're here too.
Right.
I'm like, as cool as it is, Sean, that's not why we actually come on a podcast
this is
today.
where, you guys should have a little flag to put up if I just ramble, because I do find what I'm currently focused on incredibly interesting. It does harken back to how this all does connect in a very obscure way, and why people might see me as a technologist or a biologist or even an administrator, of course, in my role. Ideally, if I sit with them a bit, they recognize that there's a philosophy dimension to that, which are all 3 things I formally studied. I did the silly thing of getting 3 non-terminal degrees to set a goofy foundation.
I hate that term, terminal degree. I mean, it means you're still here. You haven't been terminated yet.
Or similar to the academic
right.
structures.
There you go. There you go.
Vanish. But so that all started a long time ago. But this field, that we're here to talk about, absolutely intersects those. In such interesting ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. Which is drum roll.
Biohybrid robotics.
Yeah.
Biohybrid robotics.
So right away when you say that, I guess I kind of inadvertently made the Borg. Borg
There's
joke.
a center at Carnegie called Borg.
Yeah, I would not doubt it. So maybe, especially for our audience who may not be familiar with the term, or at least maybe not out of some of the popularized sci-fi adaptations or something. Broadly speaking, what does biohybrid robotics kind of cover? Because is that everything from loss of limb prosthetics all the way through cybernetically enhanced human transhumanist. What was the thing we heard about from Jamie was at the World Expo that weird multi-torsoed individual
oh goodness, I can't remember.
Some crazy.
But the weird stuff. Just how weird does this?
Yeah. So what does fall under this umbrella term of biohybrid?
Yeah. So this has been an obsession for the last year or so, just digging through all the publications to understand what are the subfields that really characterize this entire field, and there are 4. So microrobotics. That's where you'll see. Often single cellular,
Okay,
organisms.
so micro, really small,
really tall, really small. That's where you're going to see things like algae or bacteria enlisted into these technological structures and deployed. Or
so actually, just stop there before we go to the other 3. So because I think most people wouldn't think of a robot as an algae.
Right.
How on earth does that work?
Yeah, let's back up to the current working framing of what is biohybrid robotics, just to see how that can support these different subfields. And this was a focus during my recent trip to Zurich,
which we want to talk about as well.
Where I'm always engaging with the community and discussing this quite a bit, and I've been doing a lot of interviews with experts. So biohybrid robotics, you need to have a living element. So that could be tissue, that could be organ, that could be whole organism. And then you need a robotic construct that you're kind of subsuming that into, and you have some other aim than the organism originally involved. Or
so this really is Borg. I mean, Borg is the archetype,
right? Yes. So then there's a control aspect, right? And there's now you're part of a thing, maybe a community. And the different there are different ways that you could attach that notion of Borg to the different subfields for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So then that's the first category, the micro robots.
Yeah. And does that include, I remember seeing in the past too, you see some of these demonstrations, these microscopic demonstrations of getting these little tiny organisms to like replicate or do these little almost like atomic level movements and stuff like that. Are those the
not the Xenobot stuff?
Maybe it was
yes.
that. I can't remember.
11 is invariably going to come up.
Is that part of it, or is that another layer that's like?
Yeah, this is good to bring up because this is why people feel some familiarity.
Yeah.
But when we investigate that, it ends up biohybrid is new and different to them because you may have nanofabricated the structure or something. But if you look at biohybrid robotics in the micro robotics space, you're going a little bit further.
Okay.
And it's never just modification of the organism.
So you got living and non-living fused
it's
together.
It's got to be
somewhere,
non-living.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
There has to be some other purpose. You're not just augmenting that thing to do what it wants to per se.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah. All right. That's the micro level.
Yes.
Because there's something I want to ask you about, because there's a demonstration I saw a long time ago by I think they were at the University of Michigan with cockroaches. So I'm curious to ask.
Oh, that's coming up.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll move over to living tissue integrated robotics.
Right.
So this is really where you're going to see it's often going to be muscle tissue and producing what we call a bioactuator attached to a synthetic scaffold. You're 3D printing something. You're also tissue engineering, printing the tissue effectively. In fact, there are teams that have created,
okay.
Yeah.
Hold it a second.
Yeah.
So
this is what we do need to it's like a throttle. Like hold on, put the brakes.
So now you've got the sort of 3D printed sort of limb, plastic limb, whatever,
Right.
and you're putting sort of real living muscle on that.
Yep.
But you said you're also potentially 3D printing the muscle as well.
Yeah, the different platforms that are developed. There's an open source platform
Right.
developed by one team that allows you to do that all at the same
Right.
time. Now, the culturing aspect is a slow dimension of this. You're kind of preparing to develop the tissue, and you can't create an attached construct through that. You can just sort of prepare both.
Okay, right, and then somehow sort of fuse them together. I have visions of sort of artificial meat, sort of creating instead of creating sort of chicken fillets in a vat, you're creating these muscles that you then
100% actually.
Well, I mean, if Murderbot comes right back, where you have these,
Murderbot was going to come up,
or Terminator, right? I forget Arnold's. What was Arnold's model? The T-100. Or something, not the liquid one, but the one like the skeleton with the
1000 or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's an interesting conversation that we maybe could have later about how Murderbot plays into this.
Yeah, yes. I love. I just finished the show not too long ago. I'm loving it.
So
you realize you're going to be excommunicated from the biohybrid community because
they're going
to be listening to this thinking, what is this guy doing? He's basically raising every sort of existential threat trope there is.
Yeah. We'll navigate them.
Right.
But also in this space, what's very interesting is you have, for example, use of organs. So sensory organs that perform beyond our ability with synthetic equivalents.
Yeah.
And an example is a device that some would refer to casually as smellocopter. So you have a drone and you've taken a moth organ, you put it in there. They've developed a chip for this. And it's better at detecting explosives,
really,
and other kind of chemical signals. And,
so how do they keep the bit of the moth alive?
This is challenge number one of the film. Okay, right. So
for 1
as,
second,
there's that one actually can go for about 2 days.
Wow.
So to deploy in certain circumstances could be effective, could be field effective.
Sure.
Right? So the micro robots, those can hang out for quite a while, obviously. And that can be problematic if they're used in therapeutics, right? So especially if it's going after a brain tumor and other kinds of applications. There are companies actually developing the micro robots already.
Yep.
So that one's closest to translation. The one that invokes your cockroaches is getting into cyborg type.
Okay.
So cyborg type.
Is that's still in this category too, or is that going into
another space? And I'll characterize it a bit better. So I should say that in the before we leave living tissue integrated robotics, the scale has gotten pretty dramatic.
Okay.
There's a team under Shoji Takeuchi in Tokyo that's developed what would look like the forearm of Terminator.
Oh, okay.
So plastic, not metal, but all muscle, multi-muscle actuated.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're figuring out ways.
That's just wild. And like in my mind's eye, I'm seeing the intro sequence from Westworld.
I was going to say,
right, where they have this. Like that's kind of like the whole intro to that show is sort of like the fabrication of these
But actually, I mean, even thinking of Ghost in the Shell, the original anime movie, where there are the sequences where you see the sort of the cyborg being actually sort of constructed in the vat, sort of layer by layer.
Well, and I think again, coming back to Murderbot, I won't leave it alone. I'm sad that it's over, but one of the things that in that as a plot device also is how compared to synthetic or aluminum or machine parts, it's much easier and faster for them in this context to regrow organic tissue because it's soft and squishy and can grow and can heal itself, as opposed to like the underlying, like you save the robotics, if you will, for like the skeletal structure and the electronic, the sensors and the chips and something like that. But you cover it with like the muscle and the sinew and all that stuff is, organic.
And I'm going to preempt where the conversation is going to go, because I can imagine some people are listening to this thinking, this is crazy. This is just, the yuck factor is off the scale. Yeah. And yet, I think we've got to grapple with this because there are very real reasons for doing this. And there's a very big difference between cultured tissue and a living organism with sort of all those sort of pain receptors and everything. So,
much more to consider, right?
Yes.
Than just kind of face value.
Yeah.
I would love to get into aims because I want to represent what folks in the field are motivated to accomplish. And a lot of it I have found profoundly interesting. And I'm convinced in certain regards that this is the way to go.
And I think that's so important because otherwise you just sort of get into this idea of sort of this is crazy stuff rather than this actually has very deep thinking and meaning behind it.
Yeah. Moving into cyborg type.
Yes.
So, this is where you develop a control interface, and they operate many different ways. They can be kind of neurologic.
And by control interface, you mean literally sort of taking an organism and you take it over.
And that's coming to that.
You'll see.
I've heard it was several years ago. There was a demonstration. I think the researcher, I'd have to look him up. I don't know his name, but I think at the time was from the University of Michigan. And that was this whole cockroach demonstration that they would surgically implant this little...
Are you going to talk about the kit?
This little box on
these
little... And then the guy's like literally driving a cockroach around,
Yeah, Backyard Brains is a company that sells for young people to learn things like... what's the basis for Neuralink and these things that are starting to enter the media where we're talking about this in relation
Junior
to
Neuralink.
Junior Neuralink. But you're going to need to go to the pet store. You're going to get your hissing cockroach, and then you're going to get in the mail. It's not cheap, but that's because they do use kind of surgical grade components.
Okay.
And instructions on how to perform your roach surgery, so that then with your iPhone you can steer it around.
Oh my god! Just go. So I went to Backyard Brains, and the first is like a 9-year-old child, like controlling something. Right. Oh my god!
I feel like it's one of those things that when it emerged, people had to kind of squint and decide if we were going to be okay with this. And we turned out to be okay. Actually, Obama has talked about how this was helpful in educating young people on.
Yes,
because we want to see growth of certain
this is crazy
research directions here, development directions.
Yeah. So for $150, we can buy the claw, which we can control someone's forearm muscle by attaching the electrodes or whatever it is to it.
I have that.
Does it work?
It does. I have children. I've tested it.
Come here. Trust your father. Come here.
Your father, you just strap this on your arm.
It would work great at an auction. It's a useful device. But I plan to actually bring it around sometime.
A neuron spiker box. I'm not sure what that is.
See, this is a rabbit hole.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. But these are all available. Wow.
Yeah, so this field they've developed interfaces for just their jellyfish, what we call flower beetle. It's about the size of the back of your hand, really beautiful creature, but they can activate flight, they can steer it, they can and the more mature interfaces more recently actually kind of a callback to your Emma episode in terms of care.
I would imagine this is a place where you need a little bit of that.
Right. Well, there's much to discuss there. But recognizing that nature is also just in this context better at certain things than we could be. So they've decided they've learned not to micromanage the insect in turbulent air, for example, because it's just going to do that.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
So then it's more about learning. And there are ultrasound mechanisms. There are electrical probe mechanisms. There are kind of mechanical mechanisms for how you can achieve. We've got turtles, we've got rats, we've got eels, we've got the field is already expanded pretty sizably in terms of this.
Right.
That's wild.
So that's the control category.
Yeah, that's cyborg type is a framing that you'll find in a couple of reviews.
And does the cyborg category? I guess my question is around the permanence of the cyborg nature.
Hot topic.
Does it like?
Is it reversible?
So for example, if I strap on this,
you're specifically interested in.
If I put on the claw, for example, will I ever regain? Like, are you ever like? Is it a one?
If you find somebody the other side of the world with their iPhone, just push it.
Yeah.
Just random slaps, But I mean, that's one thing I'd be curious about. Like, to count in that category, is it a permanent thing, or is it something more where, because again, I start thinking, I mean, right away, I mean, my brain is spinning with the combination of, you see all these like the figure and the atlas and all these humanoid robots, but also the work that's been done for like exoskeleton type stuff, to where, so the human remains, for most, all intents and purposes, they remain untouched, but they are able to wear a cybernetic device in some ways to have more than human capabilities with strength and speed and things like that. Yeah. But is cybernetic, does it have to be a permanent joining of those two things to count?
Yeah, there are two interesting points here. One, in certain cases that has been demonstrated. So the jellyfish I mentioned, this is Nicole Zhu's work, originally out of Stanford, now at Colorado. And she's continuing now with DARPA funding to investigate sea sponges and others. Mm-hmm. But when she published her original work on control of a jellyfish, and this is for ocean exploration, ocean surveillance.
Oh, interesting. Which actually begins to tie into when we talk about
the
why.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But what she did that was interesting, she published on her own a companion ethics piece.
Mm-hmm.
And she discussed how they ensured both kind of post-modification animal thriving and how they evaluated for that.
Sure.
Right.
So that is definitely not always the case.
Yeah.
In some cases, you're introducing the control technology during development, because then it's going to become better situated, better rooted, more effective.
Yep.
That organism arguably never understands itself other than being a biohybrid. Some little moths that utilize this way, that live their whole life. And if you would try to attach that interface to an adult, it just wouldn't stay seated as effective.
Okay, so you got to start young.
Yeah, they'll do it. Yeah, pupa stage. They'll just basically introduce it so they grow into.
And I'm sure the cockroach does not survive the device being removed.
It's complicated for the cockroach. There's a really interesting this is about 2 months ago, of a thin biofilm electrode. That it's fascinating, because the work that made this possible obviously was much more like you're describing.
Yeah.
But now we understand a lot of the neuroanatomy. Yeah. You can apply this gold film electrode and gain control.
And pass through the whatever.
But isn't that interesting? Because that's also where neurointerfaces are going. Sort of, there are a number of companies and research groups that are moving away from the invasive interfaces to the non-invasive interfaces. So
that's an interesting footnote to this in terms of how this could, and this will be the last subfield we'll get to in a sec, but how this starts to converge into that one. In terms of what you're describing.
Yep.
The other point I was going to make in relation to what you said, so the exoskeleton by itself, we wouldn't say biohybrid because you're in control. Yep. No one's compromised your agency. But in Nicole's work and the work of others, these cyborg type solutions, we are seeing enhancement of the creature's ability to perform. So her jellyfish is able to move faster than any natural jellyfish of the same type. So now they've gone past control.
Super enhanced sort of meta jellyfish.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like the Fantastic Four. It's like the super, the enhanced.
It's a whole subgenre of fiction here. Yes.
That's wild.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it's interesting because there's an Army research. It's called Cyborg 2050 paper.
Okay.
Interesting, kind of thorough, but they'll talk in there about similar approaches for people. And augmentation approaches, and then they kind of propose a post-augmentation syndrome, which is interesting to consider in relation to, what if a jellyfish has a sense of its speed, and post-modification,
and then you remove it.
Is it still thriving if it can't escape anymore?
Right. Yes. Yeah. If you take something away that it's got used to and known. Yeah.
That's Well, and it's funny too. I mean, I think jokingly. But there's a serious question there too, of course, with military application, right? I think it was one of the Austin Powers films where they were going to have like dolphins with lasers or sharks. I think it was sharks. It was sharks with lasers. But there's a history too of using animals like especially dolphins with their
dolphins and dogs. Yes.
Dolphins, small whales, dogs, for whatever the purpose, either discovering, finding explosives, people, rescue,
or even planting them,
whatever. And then of course that gets into this big think about like the role chimpanzees have played in science and stuff. And then this layer of, while you can see there'd be this like, Dr. Evil-esque thing of like, we're going to attach, lasers to all of them or whatever. But what is the conversation or the boundary of where that ethical conversation comes from? And coming back to this idea of care, of when it's a living tissue, how do you know when it's feeling pain, especially if it is a full creature that has its own level of autonomy, intelligence, self-awareness, whatever, that we can guess at. I'm curious because I think that for me anyway, that quickly falls on the other side of like the technology part is really interesting and cool, but then right away is like, if it's a single-celled organism, maybe we could argue it doesn't have. Do we know definitively?
Which I guess is a big philosophical question.
Big question.
Nociception. Yeah. So does something have the same pain experience we do? Yeah. And even the receptors. So we sort of draw the line at them not having our receptors, and we call it not pain.
Yeah.
And this is really interestingly featured in Nicole's paper on the jellyfish.
Right.
And then in discussions also about just understanding pain in non-vertebrates. I think we've all seen an insect, move to avoid pain or preserve itself.
What does that mean? Yes.
In her work, when she's interfacing the jellyfish, it'll produce extra mucus. It'll sort of respond. Right. Yep. So interestingly,
they're especially interesting with jellyfish because there's a huge amount of uncertainty about the nature of that organism in the first place. Right. Sort of to what extent is it sort of has it any awareness at all, or is it just a bundle of things that just sort of go along? Yes.
So front and center in a lot of this as I think more about it. Because the cockroach example has now graduated to what I saw in Zurich, which was more of a command control lead cockroach and a swarm. So because that's efficient.
God, that's both cool and disgusting at the same time.
You should see the video, which I think is available online. When they activate,
it just makes my skin crawl with it.
Yeah,
when they swarm of cockroaches.
It's also Madagascar hissing cockroaches. But when they activate the leader, it's from a technology. It's more efficient because you don't need the same sophistication on anyone else.
Yeah,
they just come to it.
It's the Pied Piper of cockroaches.
It is totally Pied Piper.
Yes. Yeah.
Ugh.
Okay, so
there's a super villain growing here where you're like, I'm a cockroach man, and you turn on your dial and like control.
It's scary just for a second though.
Yeah.
Then it's just kind of ick and weird. But
so then the fourth and final subcategory.
And I'll put one note out there, which is that the DARPA did launch a hybrids program for biohybrid development. So that launched just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And people I'm naming.
Not that there's any military interest in this.
Right. And they said, infrastructure surveillance, they kind of minimize the battlefield applicability outside of surveying and all that stuff. But so the final is, and you can see this kind of operates as a spectrum where you've got an organism captured into a robotic system. Often these will be systems that travel. And this is to use it as a sensor, a living sensor.
Okay.
An example is the water flea daphnia. Again, just much more sensitive to things that we care about, such as pollutants that we might find in our lakes. And it'll just start to, if it doesn't like what's in the water, it spins. And so if you have a colony of those, they've got a machine learning algorithm to understand.
But where does the hybrid bit come in? So that is not just genetic modification. This is something else.
Right. This is you're starting to do a couple things that are interesting, right? So going back to evolution, I kind of can't help it, because it's not just necessarily a very long process. We're starting to choose the daphnia that are easier to evaluate, those kinds of things, but and breed them. So and in this field, so the incorporation of the living element does include compromising its agency and it's the animal thriving dimension of this biohybrid robotics stuff.
But you're then turning it into a device effectively. So it's a living device.
And lots of different aquatic organisms. In fact, when you look at kind of the reach of this work in the subfields, It's surprising considering that it's sort of the least in terms of publications, this particular subfield.
Right, yes.
But as far as its reach, it's already, I think, second.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting. Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I pulled up, while you had mentioned, I pulled up the DARPA thing, and it's called Hybrids, Hybridizing Biology and Robotics Through Integration for Deployable Systems.
Yeah,
so
right.
read into the deployable as you like, I suppose. But yeah.
It's Daphnia in lakes. What else could it be?
We just are going to do that. But no one has aims of any other sort of usage, perhaps.
But really interesting, because you can absolutely see the utility in that. And if you look at the diversity of sensory systems within living organisms and think about how you actually co-opt that.
And I feel like there's so much untapped in that regard.
Yeah.
And this, the Austrian government agrees with you, because this particular solution is already deployed in 4 lakes.
Really?
Interesting.
One of the features also is on the robotics side, how that could transmit to like a treatment center if there's something detected.
Yeah. So, I mean, and just walk us through this. So I've got this image of Daphnia sort of spinning round if they sort of experience this pollution. I mean, how do scientists make them do that?
So there's a device. It's a modular device. So this particular project series is pretty far along, the one that's deployed. And it's the spelling. The name is it's Robo. That part's easy, but then it goes CON. I think it's Synesis or something. But it's what it's referring to is a term for habitat and integration of living things,
right?
But robotic.
Okay.
And so they have a chamber that these are held in, and they actually use machine learning algorithms to understand if they're playing or spinning.
Ah, right. So now you've got so do you actually deploy the chamber then? You sort of put it down.
Goes into a big pod that then can spin around.
So now the individual organisms are just an integrated part of the sensor.
Yep.
That's, I got it. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I suppose, getting past the notion of sort of an aquarium in a sense. And it's an active mobile system.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the canary in the mine, but way more sophisticated.
Yeah, and there's more precedent for this. Humans have been very interested in the natural capabilities that are out there. Some really bizarre examples. If anyone wants to sort of wrinkle their brow, look up Tempest Prognosticator.
Prognosticator.
Yeah, so there's a tendency of leeches to crawl upward when the pressure drops. So that's appropriate look.
The side eye was enough. I'm like, wait, before I hit enter on this search,
please. But yeah, there it is, the image in the upper left there. But so then there was sort of elaborate device was created, but really it's just 12 jars with leeches in them. And when the pressure drops, the idea was from the original inventor. This it might be something you put on your coffee table. I don't know. Others didn't agree. It didn't take on.
Interesting.
But a bell would go off when the leeches had climbed. So how you sustain them, how you get them. Lots of questions. But
the sustaining bit is interesting. Just a little bit of blood now and again.
Oh, yes.
Right. You got to feed them.
This is how you power the system. Right?
That's right. Yes.
Got to feed it.
It's a full biohybrid system. So all the way from the humans to the leeches and the feedback loop back to the humans.
Yeah.
Fully cyborg.
That's
cybernetic.
Okay. So I have a question about one is, so I like the example of using like the water flies, right, to test the quality. But the one thing I was, because in my mind is, so not a cybernetically or biohybrid, but just genetically modified, was the controversy around using genetically modified mosquitoes, right? So, I mean, I think, mosquitoes are a massive sort of disease spreader and causes a lot around the world. We have lots of, and so there is a very sort of clever way of genetically modifying the mosquitoes. So when they go out, they mate and basically kill off all they basically sterilize the population. But then also, again, and everyone might say, oh, that sounds like a great idea, because everyone hates getting bit by a mosquito, especially if it's carrying disease or, dengue fever or malaria or whatever. But then it's all those second, third, fourth order magnitudes of that change of what does that do to the ecosystem.
And of course, in this particular case, this was down in Florida, where the company developing these was wanting to do field trials, and the local population pushed back and shut it down. And basically it wasn't that they didn't want their, or they liked their mosquitoes, but they didn't like the idea of somebody fiddling around with the genetics of stuff in their backyard.
There was a backfire too. There's a part of that story that I find so science-y, which is somebody, more than one person, was fixated on how to create the prettiest mosquitoes. right? Because these had to win.
Hey, there's a niche for everyone, man.
I love that. I know that someone didn't win and they took it personally, right? They maybe still be nurturing theirs, But
this is how supervillains are created. They're spurned at an event. They're like, I'll show you with my army of cockroaches.
Spurned by the community.
That's right.
Next thing you know is you have biohybrid mosquitoes.
That's right. They show up with biohybrid, whatever, a swarm of it. And they're, my goodness.
The backfire was because they had done exactly this and then made a more resilient species and then deployed it. And this wasn't in the United States. It hybridized with the local community. Nature found a way. Right?
Yeah.
And then the resulting mosquito was more resilient.
Right. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
See, that's
but it brings up the whole, I'm getting back to biohybrids, the whole question of why do this? What are the advantages? What are the potential pitfalls? And how does the research community actually navigate those?
Well, what's always interesting, this is partly why I really wanted to understand the expert perspectives to see what they'd already diagnosed. And appreciate that. It's sort of applying, there's an approach, critical response theory, Liz Lerman developed. Beautiful approach.
Liz is a professor here.
Just love it for how you don't assume necessarily. You give people an opportunity to offer thoughts. And in this case, the field is concerned with most of the same things that came out at a public workshop, now starting to get the public perspective. It was all effectively there. One of the aspects of this is you don't have an immune system. So if you're sitting here deploying living tissue, and we might, foster a superbug in that, that's, certainly something to be concerned about. Because I should say it's human tissue in many cases, cardiac, skeletal.
Okay, yes.
Through engineered lines, grown tissue.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too. So both of you also had separately gone off to different corners of the globe.
Yes,
well, kind of the same corner-ish, but to different professional conferences.
Yes.
And
I should say I'm sort of talking as if I know nothing about this. Of course, I work with you, Sean, so I know quite a bit.
But I'm curious from those, those gatherings. Well, one, it's still we're like a week out, I think, when you get back.
A couple of weeks.
So a week or two.
Right,
so hopefully it's still somewhat fresh, but I'm curious, what were some of like the key highlights that coming back from that, having seen, because these are, I imagine they're fairly small gatherings. I can't imagine these are like massive conferences.
About 60 people. I went to the symposium, so that's really people that identify as being in this space explicitly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the symposium was the name of it.
Yeah, Biohybrid Robotics Symposium.
Yes.
Okay.
It was the first ever, so that was exciting.
Oh, nice.
Many of the folks were meeting each other for the first time. Not their immediate collaborators, but those others they had, read the works of.
Oh, cool. I saw Michael Levin is on the list there.
Yep. And Josh, his collaborator, who does a lot of his technical work, presented. He was there. So it was incredible, partly because being a symposium, people were also talking about what they're doing. Not just what they've
published.
Now, I can't necessarily say too much about that other than what was shared openly. I can tell you that there's significant progress toward intelligent biohybrid robotic systems. So, and that starts to get into the 11S space of like, what do we mean by intelligence?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what do we mean by intelligence here? Are we talking about AI mixed with these things, or is it more sophisticated?
There's plenty we could talk about with the AI part of that. But in this case, we're talking about biologic intelligence. So, and manifesting outside of a brain structure. That's where.
What is that? Wait, okay. So like, I think I have an idea of that, but what does that mean? What would that look like? How would intelligence manifest outside of what we understand to be a brain?
Yeah, let me show you. No.
So you got something I can plug in right here?
Yes. So I won't go like full Levin in terms of down to the cellular intelligence.
Okay. We should say for people who are not familiar with Michael Levin's work, he is doing really groundbreaking work in terms of how biology works and how we rethink the whole biological system at multiple levels.
Yeah, and we did. Andrew, you did a really fun interview with him about a year ago.
Pre-podcast, yes.
Yeah, so I'll link that in the show notes so people can see, because it's a great example of him again going through and talking, because he was talking about, that was what he was talking about, his worms on that one, the flatworms,
yes,
which was really cool. But anyway, sorry,
profound moments in that one that you did. Like that, I had a jaw drop during Andrew's interview with him. Just to tease a little bit there, but so intelligence in terms of kind of nerve gob. So can a bundle of nerves, given kind of a simple eye, recognize, for example, a shape? It's one thing. So you could do maze running with that.
Hold it. So the remain somebody hold it bits in this. So now you're talking about a bundle of nerves outside the body that's sensitive to light, effectively working as a crude eye that you can then use as a sensor.
Yeah, it goes surprisingly further, and this is why I find this field so interesting, because this fundamental question of what do I mean by other biologic intelligence is they're working because they're doing in some cases, a lot of cases, bottom up. They're kind of arriving at these things, and in this case, you do have a robotic system that's that someone's included a nerve gob, and we're talking shape recognition. So that's where I was like, okay, like at first it was like, so it's able to kind of operate. It can see shapes, and then
does it recognize your creator?
You've got that bonding moment.
That's right. You will devour the world, but not me, your creator.
As you create the nerve gob, you look it in the eye and say, "Remember me." Yes.
Yeah, just like with some wildlife. So the piece of it that I was really struck by. And this will be detailed in a publication. I've got permission to talk about this one. Recognizing portions of shapes, and recalling the total shape. So you can look for the imprint of the shape.
Yep.
And then look to see if you show it a piece of a rectangle, for example, does it recall? So now you've got memory.
The memory.
Yeah. So, but this is so interesting because this is beginning to parallel conversations around intelligence in computers.
Yeah.
So we talk about artificial intelligence, but we're not still quite sure what we mean by intelligence in the agency.
How do you quantify whether something has or has not?
But now what you're describing is exactly paralleling that conversation.
At a biological level, right?
Yes.
And then there are comminglings of AI and biological intelligence in these systems. There's an example of a cyborg type where demonstrated control in terms of how they achieved proving it was under control from the AI was to cause it to do things it doesn't normally do.
Okay.
Under the whims of the AI. And what it was doing was predating on things it doesn't usually eat.
Okay. Not humans, I hope.
Dude, this is C. elegans, a common little kind of not.
I mean, joke. It's more of a nervous laughter of like, oh dear, what are we doing?
My brain is going to zombies and thinking. So this is sort of post zombie apocalypse, and thinking if you had all of these zombies, what could you do if you incorporated them into biohybrid systems? I mean, the possibilities are endless.
That's a nice upgrade.
Right. That's it. Yes.
Yeah. Are we talking slow zombies or fast zombies? Right. Like that.
Eventually fast.
Eventually fast. See, that's it, right?
When you got the technology,
they've got like they have lasers on their eyes.
So I don't know whether anybody has experimented with this genre. I don't think they have, but techno zombies I think could be a thing.
That's
you're making an investment in your zombie. That's
there we are.
That's right.
I know. Yeah. Yes.
Long-term
just household zombie. You know,
just 28 centuries later. Yes.
It's a bit off.
Oh, that's a good one. I like it.
So but I've got to come back to this question of the why. So what is driving this, and where are the guardrails that people are talking about? Because I mean, yes, we've both been in the communities. These are responsible communities. These aren't people who are just wildly saying, "Let's just try this and see." Yeah. They're thinking about this deeply.
Right. So you could look over one team is under Kit Parker. This is Harvard. They're looking to construct a functional heart replacement and making really interesting progress. Very serious work. There's a team that developed, it's an Asian mud eel cyborg, but if you're in the robotic space, we don't do well in the ocean. We just really don't do well in aquatic cave systems or anything like that.
I mean, metal electronics don't do well with water.
It's done. And, I think back to the monsoon in Thailand.
Where the kids stuck in the cave system.
12-year-olds. 9 days, we didn't know if they were alive, and we lost a rescuer. And I think it's plausible that the mud eel would have, it can carry a payload. It could have brought
interesting.
It certainly couldn't have gotten through the jagged, narrow.
And of course, that brings up the whole realm of search and rescue. I mean, even back to the cockroaches, the idea of something that can get to places that's
or think about mechanical systems. I mean, right off the top, I think about all those times when you hear these, the aftermath of earthquakes or building collapse, where for humans, the rescue one, dangerous, but also, I mean, we're limited in where we can get our human bodies through like destroyed rubble. If you had some sort of like that, the cockroach army for good that could go through and locate people, send a beacon or something so that those efforts could be, expeditiously directed to do something as opposed to, just hoping to find something. I don't know.
So what's interesting is going back to this large beetle, because that's the intent.
Yeah.
It doesn't disturb the rubble, but also they've already outfitted these with heat sensors and audio sensors to detect humans.
Yep.
Because oftentimes we're wasting our time when there's actually
no
no one in that particular rubble.
Well, that's a tragedy, right? You might be digging 5 feet and never know that you missed you missed it.
And what's the pushback to somebody who says, surely we can do this mechanically? Why use a cockroach when we can just build a little robot?
It's interesting. Sort of the race is on in that regard in terms of some of the interesting capabilities, particularly I think with the flower beetle, because it can just carry more and do more.
Right. Yes.
The cockroach, I'm still sort of waiting to understand the very explicit kind of obvious win.
Although I sort of, it was a bit of a loaded question because so after you were in Zurich, I was in Sheffield for the Living Machines conference, which is more about bio-inspired robotics. But one of the presentations there was, it's not related to cockroach biohybrids, but it was just showing how thin a space a cockroach can go through, and quite unbelievable. That you look at how they can flatten their body, and they're using this to try and see whether they can emulate that in micro robots, not biohybrids. But they are light years away from doing anything close to what a biological organism can do.
It's so interesting in that regard. So I should even point over to the living tissue integrated space. And why are people doing this work otherwise? Micro tweezers. So just efficient micro tweezers for surgeries and things like that. Or even you can really get on very small scale in terms of what you might manipulate.
Next time you're in the surgery, they say, bring out the ants.
It's
It's
an interesting opportunity space to try to investigate with your mind and your creativity. Because I know my mind kind of goes blank sometimes. It's like, wow, that changes everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I was sitting here thinking, because when you mentioned that the small, or especially like the flatness that they can get through is also, I'm like, okay, I need some sort of command and control bug to keep all the scorpions from getting into my house. Because same thing, they do the same thing.
They just squeeze through.
It's like the thickness of a U.S. nickel.
Right.
They can squeeze through, which is, you can't seal your house. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
But it's like, how would you? So also learning, like, how do you stop that?
Well, actually, now I'm wondering whether anybody's working on scorpion biohybrids.
Yeah. Probably.
I haven't seen it in the.
Well, that's the thing, they can sting you.
This is definitely a DARPA project.
Well, and I would like to point to something, because you really raised kind of the centerpiece of it, which is, have they or haven't they? Have we seen that explicit arrangement? No, but has the device already been constructed?
Right.
I would argue in the case of the scorpion, it's there because. This is going again, get back into taxonomy and phylogenetics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shared anatomy,
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I know this is sort of part of the work you're doing, so looking at those shared anatomies so you can sort of see where the read acrosses are.
Right. This benefits kind of from both directions. This can help funders and regulators understand the kind of reach of the work that they're supporting and consider implications, like, does that cause us now to have the opportunity to go for a species that we consider protected, or those kinds of things. And then you want to think also, like, replacement, right? What kind of species are we working with? How can we maybe shift that interface to something that's more replenishable? And then on the investigator side, on the experimentalist side, you might want to optimize for travel, across species with your approach.
Yep.
So this is why I'm going to be continuing conversations with Nicole as she moves into other aquatic non-vertebrates.
Okay.
I'm super interested in understanding, and she and I are going to explore this, how much her device needs to be modified or not. I suspect very little, but we'll see.
Right.
Interesting.
Just on that, so this has really got me thinking. So, of course, if you look at deep ocean, one of the biggest unexplored areas that we know of, and people talk about us know more about space than they do about deep ocean. Partly because it is so difficult for us as squishy humans to get down there. But of course, there are many species that do. So are people looking at deep ocean exploration using biohybrids?
Yeah, this is, again, where it's interesting in a couple ways. So first of all, the ocean is also full of incredible sensory capabilities.
Right.
So, things that we haven't really considered yet incorporating into biohybrid robotics. But then you get far enough down and things kind of look really interesting, right? Isopods. And so
and all the thermal stuff that, I mean, sustaining life from thermal activity instead of photo activity.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that the notion of just, if one day we're down at the bottom of the ocean and a bunch of isopods are showing up is enough of a jump scare for myself. But, but they're so bizarre. But
because they look like enormous cockroaches, right?
They do. See, right? Yeah. So now,
see, it's starting to wonder. You're like, oh my god! Now you can ride one.
Yeah. Oh no! You just need a couple synthetic and genetic. We just
got to put the claw on it and the brain implant into it.
You could be like Aquaman, but you're riding a giant cockroach on the bottom of the ocean. Oh my god, this is
so you've got different opportunities for things to be similar. We talked about within species or family or things like that, or genus that people might remember. But we also see what we call convergent evolution, where similar anatomy will develop in species that are very distantly related, and then you'll see what we call deep homologies or ancestral features. There's an interesting example I like to point to. There's a really adorable creature called a hyrax. Now, this is a search that you wouldn't be disturbed by.
Okay.
And this is in Ethiopia, cliff-dwelling, fluffy, pudgy, adorable thing, marmot-esque. And then the interesting thing, though, that we've discovered, not we've in terms of the field, but just more broadly in biology, the neuroanatomy of the hyrax is almost identical to the African elephant. So,
interesting.
Right. And of course, you have a creature that we regard very differently,
sure,
even than this cute, creature. But ostensibly, you build an interface for the hyrax, and it would port to the African elephant.
Well, that's going to get us some not fan mail.
It does get DARPA what it needs.
Send it all to that Sean.
Right. So
then the other Sean.
So as these communities sort of explore what's possible and talk to each other, where do you sense the limits are of what people are not willing to do or don't think we should be doing?
It's interesting. I would say, in many cases, folks can instantly conjure their aims, and those aims would resonate. Often there's a personal connection to that aim. And you have interesting individuals, neuroscientists plus roboticists,
Sure.
Many are just kind of unpacking new fundamental understandings in nature. Right. There are certainly spaces, if you look globally, where there are developments underway where I don't really see that. So in my case, with my teams, I would say you never lead with technology. You lead with purpose.
Yes.
And that is something that we are supporting. That's kind of external. And I do see a subset of work here. And this is partly why I'm feeling the need to engage and create conversations, not to dictate those conversations, just to make sure they happen and that they're informed. Because I do certainly see what I would describe otherwise as someone wanting to continue to achieve a greater capability,
right?
Who can't give me a reason for that other than someone will find and assign that someday, and I don't love that answer.
Yeah. And of course, this is why I was in Sheffield at Living Machines, because we had the paper that you sort of led on, looking at how you think about that and sort of where you draw the line between the need for sort of open-ended curiosity and creativity in the lab versus being increasingly responsible as you begin to tinker with these things and put them into the real world, the wild.
Right. And there's been a litany of discoveries in terms of fundamental biology in this field, absolutely already in this field.
Right.
It's exponential growth recently. The other reason I'm really focused on it, it's exciting to see a scientific field emerge. It's just super exciting if you're me, and it's technology, living stuff, and philosophy effectively. But that moment,
and something that couldn't have happened before this time and place.
That's a good point.
Convergence
of nanotechnology. You have to be doing tissue engineering. So what Emma's focused on, synthetic biology. You certainly need all those things to converge. Which also, anytime something's like that, society doesn't even know to look for it, let alone recognize it.
That's exactly it. We don't even have the language to have the conversation.
Well, and I was curious on that front too, Sean, if you speak to any either things that you yourself anecdotally have seen, or even just again from these communities of other scientists and researchers around. I would be curious the role that artificial intelligence might be playing in that other investigative side of these things of going, have you thought of this and this? And because we hear about this. I mean, honestly, that's one of the
Andrew knows I've
played. So this is why I'm laughing, because I know what Sean's been up to.
Because we hear about this a lot too, right? In some of the scientific community that we hear, but AI is also helping scientists discover new things all the time.
Yeah.
And then it comes down, then you see the other side of that, which is like actually half the things it found were things that we've tried
so often,
and it really wasn't anything novel. But nonetheless, I'm curious just from that perspective, like, do these other looking toward different types of intelligence, if you will, just using like tools like AI, is that playing a role in either accelerating or maybe potentially widening the field of view of these different types of biohybrid,
it's such,
I don't want to say like concoctions. That sounds that sounds like too haphazardly, but in terms of thinking of new ways of exploiting these different living tissues and robotics and kind of finding that sort of marriage between them.
There's so much opportunity for that to be the case. So if you look at the different disciplines that are being brought together here, and we consider AI in relation to them, AI is accelerating materials development.
Right.
It is accelerating signal processing, so natural signals. We see that available as a catalyst around. And I've looked, just kind of did this initial mapping to understand the different interdisciplinarity of the field, and I could very easily assign AI to each of those and say like, okay, what's that going to cause? But then like at navigating this opportunity space, when we have all this bias and when we start to say like, what are the possibilities?
Right.
Because I think we have all these issues with trying to imagine out in that direction. We're going to immediately think, this is why you see so much biomimicry in biohybrid development. I think one of my hypotheses is, well, I think there's two factors. One, it's familiar and it gives us something to compare against. And even kind of measure performance against. The other is you're just borrowing a lot of biomechanics we understand.
Right. Yes. Yep.
So for the sake of the robotics skeletal elements, the insides of Murderbot, it just makes sense in that regard. But it also like completely steers away from what AI or other assisted kind of with our own kind of imagining. But that's part of the ride that I took recently in terms of I attended the kind of inaugural webinar for hybrids, the DARPA thing, and heard them request specific projects, kind of outcomes that they want to see achieved. And I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's feed, a corpus. I've got, hundreds of articles on biohybrid robotics. Let's make that the reference set. And now let's ask it. I want a shopping list. I want specifications. I want to be able to just do what this says.
I want to build it. I want a recipe.
You want the blueprint and the recipe to.
I want to sell it to backyard.
You want that kit? What do I need to assemble a DIY kit for?
What was pretty nuts is, at least as kind of experientially, seeing that it does these things where it'll bring things together more effectively than any single kind of one of us might in terms of a design concept. Again, it didn't really necessarily invent, but it brought so much from other spaces together that, including things I'm just not as up to speed on. And it created a concept, a design that would have absolutely addressed the interests of the pro. But that was, and literally when they're saying like within the next few years, when I see something do this, a deep reasoning model produces not. And I said, I want commodity products here. I don't want to like have to make electronics or anything. And it created
you can get it to create the plan and tell you how to build it.
And it looked viable. I've discussed the concept with people, including at the symposium. It's led to the idea of exploring a certain design concept.
Are you going to share what the design was, or are you going to keep that under wraps?
Yeah, we can. One of the ones that AI produced was crocodile-like, both terrestrial and aquatic locomotion.
Yep. So you can go on land and in water and
it does a good job of taking the Tokyo group's methods and a little bit of Carnegie and mixing it with Harvard and then putting a microbial fuel cell in it. And things I'm like, oh, okay,
all right,
there are those. Let me look into that now. That's I think AI is the best at being like a competent, not necessarily always expert partner. And
but putting together those pieces of the puzzle that you can't see. I mean, it's like sort of having a sort of 10,000 piece puzzle. And you're not quite sure where to start, but AI can sort of see the patterns and see the connections.
So I would be curious too, like the other side of that is, before there was that capability of creating essentially a parts list that you could go to any electronics, web shop and buy all these microcontrollers and all this kind of stuff. A lot of that work had to take place in, sort of protected spaces, research labs, things like that. I'd be curious, would this not also then just open up this opportunity for someone who's like, I I have an idea. I've got an aquarium over there full of snakes.
You mean
I've got an idea.
the 10th grade science project?
Exactly. Or the super villain yet to be, who is thinking, I want to go ahead and muck about with all this kind of stuff without any of the training, without any of the understanding, without any of the care.
Right.
What are the realistic, near term? I mean, sure, I think long term we can see those somewhat. But I mean, in the near term, is there a legitimate threat of people doing just homegrown biohybrid experimentation at the risk of doing damage to themselves, the creatures, whatever? I mean, is this a real concern?
Yeah, CRISPR at home concern. Right?
Yeah.
So this is where I point back to, the portability stuff, but also what we call speciesism in science, where if something is a pest and ugly, the public is generally okay with it.
Right.
Being in a subject.
Like the cockroaches and the mosquitoes and the...
So interface is already developed. I'm glad to say no one's necessarily explored this yet, but you could potentially port some of these to animals like house cats. And all it really takes, as we know, this is what I'm kind of worried about for the field is, kind of joining the rubble of other stories throughout history where some story emerges and that becomes how the world understands biohybrid.
A myth grows from something.
But there's an interesting connection here. So you talked about the DIY bio communities, and this was a thing sort of 10 plus years ago where these local communities sort of got together, people who didn't have biological training, to play around with genetic modification, genetic engineering. And the thing that we discovered was those communities tended to be more ethical and more responsible than the people in the lab. They took their responsibility incredibly seriously. And actually the science community began to learn something from those DIY communities.
I wonder if because of the incentive and pressures are different.
Maybe,
this compulsion to need to iterate, to continue to maintain a center. And,
or if you're part of a formal organization, maybe there's also like that concern or care is above my pay grade. That's being taken care of at the organizational level.
Right. You're right.
Yes. So I'm indemnified from my work.
You hear this all the time from scientists. They say, don't burden me with the ethics. That's somebody else's problem. You pay me to do the creative stuff in the lab.
I'm finding some, with this phenomenon in terms of the conversations I've had, I'm finding that there's a cultural aspect to this. Whether that's kind of offloading that is available in certain cultural contexts versus others that just maintain ownership.
Right.
And some of the language I've heard from individuals that I've asked, because it becomes, when is it alive enough? Partly, this is a really weird sort of space to be in, where at some point, we need to regard, whatever we've created differently. And I've enjoyed, as soon as most people in the field, we can get there and then start to talk. It's interesting because you can see that we're sort of forming ideas here.
Right.
Yeah.
There is an individual, this is Shoji again, and I had the great opportunity to spend some time speaking with at the symposium. And I asked him this question. And the term that he used to understand the difference in terms of if you're alive enough, he used the word dignity.
Interesting.
And I mentioned this to you, Andrew, the other day, and you pointed out something that I hadn't thought of at the time, which is whose, right?
So the organism or yours, or the society that you're in. Yes.
That I think is really interesting. Again, this is, but I feel like this all has to get pretty unpacked.
But that brings up something else which I think is critically important here, and that is different cultural perspectives. So sitting here in the US, we tend to think about things from a US perspective and a US research perspective. But of course, talking to researchers from Japan, very, very different cultural, philosophical perspective there. It'll be different in different cultures and economies. Different if you go to First Nation communities versus sort of the developed world. And it strikes me both that we're talking about a community that is global, so you're going to have those very different perspectives that I think we need to be cognizant of, but also this idea that different people are going to think very, very differently about the living world in ways where some communities will just say, this is a commodity, and others will say, this is sacred.
It's that stark. It's that stark already in conversations. Yes. And you can imagine that that's going to lead to certain different outcomes.
Right. Sure. Yes. Yeah. And we've somehow got to navigate that without sort of imposing one particular worldview on other groups. Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, jokingly, you're like, well, one nation has an army of, the the killer dolphins with lasers and all this kind of stuff, or whatever. But it is. We see this a lot too with the exportation of just technology and the baked in biases that come with that. Also potentially in that same space of the biohybridization of things as well, of like really push it. It's like, this is how it should be done. This is how you can do it. And if you're not doing it, then it's less than.
This to me is why we need the conversations now, right from the get-go.
Yeah, always, right?
And it's interesting because everything you're describing, if we're looking at the technology dimension, the living systems, like it all intersects here so explicitly in the form of integration. Like, so now, that you think about the inputs, right? So if we're regarding AI differently, and that's factoring so extensively into this work in terms of what you might be able to do with it.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And then then you've got the other factors in terms of cultural representation.
Yeah. And that, and it's something that I've been like, as we've been sort of talking, I've been curious too about, kind of coming, instead of looking at like lower level, like insect creatures and things like that, but really bringing it back to the human. Right. So moving towards that sort of, transhumanist sort of movement of.
I've been trying to avoid that in my brain because it just it's like a magnet. It just sucks you towards.
I know. But I think it's not a far leap where once you could start to see reliable, safe use, especially. Again, for $150, we can already start playing with some of these things on our own bodies. And I think the idea of enhancing the human self, so whether it be mind, whether it be physical, has been around, forever, I would assume in some fashion. But I'm curious about, like, in these conferences, in these professional settings, like, where is the conversation going around the human application? Because one thing I'm really curious about, one is, of course, when or how someone would choose. We've seen, of course, the brain-computer interface implants, things like that. We have these other things. We've seen people using advanced prosthetics for things, but also, again, which I was sort of fascinated by, and I forget the runner's name. He was a dual. I believe it was above the knee amputee who had those blade.
Yeah, Oscar. I'm gonna mess up the surname, but yes, South Africa, yes.
Right, and that's a whole story. There's more to it. That,
complex,
but what was interesting is you have a situation where someone had lost, or never had. Let's say we can go that way too, but they did not have the normal, sort of ableist setup with two legs. So they had a prosthetic, and then the prosthetic allowed them to run faster.
Although it didn't, but that was the concern.
But that was the concern. So suddenly people were like, whoa, you can't compete with us because you have an advantage.
Right. Yes,
and it was like, what was interesting about that was something suddenly now where it was a loss of limb or a prosthetic was now seen as an advantage physically over, someone who did not have that. And so I'm curious about how that whole space also potentially would play into this
and whether the community is talking about it or whether they're studiously avoiding it.
Yeah, it's interesting. In some cases, people are kind of pivoting and walking things back to human. Where we kind of throw our hands up is the whole idea of, in the biohybrid sphere, we're always reining these things under, some kind of mandate, some idea, something we wanted to accomplish. But if you look at the Cyborg 2050, Army report, it carries the kind of usual of like, but if we won't, they will. So what I would say to people is we're still kind of trying to understand how to navigate that question. But we have to navigate that question because there's now like a sense of national security dimension.
And as you mentioned, we're at this juncture where like the technology, the knowledge, or even not the direct knowledge, but the assisted AI knowledge is there to push.
And it's the read across as well. Exactly what you were saying about the comparison between different species and how you can port something from one species to another. When we get to the point where it's really, really easy to port what we're seeing in one species over to humans.
It's already arguably the case.
Right.
Especially because if you look at how something like Neuralink was developed, it's Synchron and other companies operate in this space, but they went from down to your rats up to pig, sheep, and then they didn't do that reinventing it every time.
Right.
They were very intentional about ensuring that they could carry their R&D forward or upward. So to me, that's kind of an interesting reveal
and
they've been successful.
And then, of course, the question is, when is it truly a biohybrid? Because there's augmentation where you've got the full human in full control, but they just have enhanced abilities, versus something which the control goes the other way with the human, and they're now utilized.
And I know that he's going to regret this, but Andrew walked us right back to Murderbot. So, which they're really interesting.
Just avoid eye contact.
It's a great bookend to wrap this up with.
Yeah, what happens, in this show, without giving too much away, because it's front and center in the very beginning. You do have a situation where what's in front of you looks like a living tissue integrated biohybrid.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely sort of under control, or ostensibly, at least that's the goal. And this idea of it having what they call governor module, this is the in an overly simplistic sense. If you're in a golf cart, this is what keeps you from going too fast. It's governed, And so Murderbot's governed. He figures out how to eliminate his governor module, hack it. At that point, this is where it's an interesting thing, because is that now that's something else? And what is it when it was a biohybrid and it's no longer under control? And we really want to care about that, because now something is out there with its own agency.
That's it. Yes.
Biohybridized.
Yeah.
Finally, an agentic AI.
Got that too.
Agentic biohybrid AI.
With in that case in Murderbot, with like machine guns in their forearms. What could possibly go wrong?
On that note, we should probably wrap this up, but I suspect we're going to come back to this.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. And Sean, you'll have to come back too, because as this unfolds, this is a fantastic area to keep. I mean, I think we scratched the very, very surface of such deep and on what I think is exciting about this, which I think you are also finding the excitement here, is this is just a rich vein to keep going into that is changing fast. Also, I mean, it sounds like the speed is, you come back every 6 months or something, and the goalpost has moved because of so many new discoveries, new advancements on any of those areas, whether it be like the actual the technology, the lab, the biology, the integration elements. That's just fascinating.
Yeah.
So
moving very fast. I'd love to come back. I'll remain obsessed, I assure you.
Fantastic. Well, before we just kind of wrap up, is there anything do you want to plug? Either work that you're doing or things that you think people, I mean, I'll just continue to plug Murderbot, both the Apple Plus show and the book series, of course. They're fantastic. But curious, if there's anything you want to plug that you're doing or you want people to think would be helpful or listen to something to share with our audience.
Yeah, there is. I noticed there's really no forum for this on the internet. So with Andrew knows my silly story of standing up a subreddit called Biohybrid. We got there.
Hey, all right.
But as far as just fits and starts, but now we have 1,500 or so people, and it's an interesting space. It's very similar to I talked to the transhuman community lead to understand what this might be like to develop.
Cool.
And what it turns out to be like is people show up interested. It's not super hard to get people to get interested. They don't necessarily want to walk forward and talk about.
Right.
Everyone's kind of stepping back, still held back in processing. So that's out there. It's just it's reddit.com, our biohybrid.
/biohybrid. Nice.
Developing that.
And I'll put the link in the show notes too, so people can, if they're listening, they can go there and grab it, not have to try to remember. But yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, other than that, I'll give you some of the links to.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll, as always, I'll stuff the show notes with as many links to all the stuff. And I'll put some of the things I was searching on so you can search them up too. Cause nothing terribly gross, which was fun. But Sean, thank you so much for joining us today. This is fantastic.
It's absolute pleasure.
Eye-opening.
Yeah, fantastic. And Andrew, of course, thank you as well. This has been fantastic.
Always a pleasure.
And what a lovely opportunity again for us to have this down here in our thought laboratory.
That's right. So encourage everybody to go and watch the video as well as listen to the audio.
Absolutely. So if you're only listening, it's a good view on YouTube as well. So you can catch us anywhere. And of course, again, also I'll continue to plug if you are enjoying the show or enjoying the conversations, please do leave us a rating and review, because
this is what makes us discoverable.
It does.
And so other people can enjoy the show.
That's right. Yeah. And it's been, again, very encouraging to see our show has been climbing up the ladder, but what helps is those reviews and ratings, because that's how the other algorithms find us and share us with people who haven't heard of us yet. Yep. So fantastic. Well, Sean, Andrew, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll see everyone on the next episode of Modem Futura.
We'll see you then.
Demodulating signal.
Modem Futura is a production of the Future of Being Human initiative at Arizona State University. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. To learn more about the Future of Being Human initiative and all of our other projects, please visit us on the web at futureofbeinghuman.asu.edu.
End transmission.